New Orleans Saints opened their 2020 season with a 34-23 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As is oftentimes in these games, the thing that ends up deciding it isn't the thing that's hyped in the pregame.
Right.
Brees versus Brady, the two 40-plus quarterbacks, the two Hall of Famers, the top two on just about every significant list of statistics in the history of the NFL, were largely in the background, as it was the Saints' defense that really, and special teams that really made the plays that enabled New Orleans to win. The two interceptions of Tom Brady, and this, how many times did we say it in the offseason and leading up all the way into just a couple hours before the game when Jordy and I were doing pregame? Tom Brady, if he did nothing else, was brought in to cut down the turnovers. Jameis Winston, how many times at 30 for 30, 30 interceptions, 5 fumbles. They had 41 turnovers. Brady hadn't turned the ball over as many times as Winston did last year in 4 years. Brady hasn't thrown 2 interceptions in the season opener since 2003. Brady. Yeah. Even if he's older, even if he's past his prime, he will not turn the ball over. And guess what he did?
Turned it over a couple times.
Turned the ball over, and he turned the ball over in just such crucial situations.
He's on pace for 32 interceptions.
He is. And Janoris Jenkins' interception return for a touchdown is a ball that I couldn't believe he threw. Not only it was a bad decision, it was a bad throw. That's just type of mistake you don't expect Tom Brady to make.
It never felt like they were on the same page. I'm talking about him and his skill position players. Right. It felt like they had a disconnect the entire game, and we're so used to him getting up to the line, calling the offense, being assertive. He was looking at his wristband. That stood out to me. He is not a guy that looks at a wristband because he has been in this offense. He's been with Josh McDaniels for so long, and he was going to the wristband pretty early. That lets you know that he does not have a great feel and a great grasp of what's going on within the Tampa Bay offense. And so that stood out to me. I thought a lot of their players that we hyped up that they brought in over the offseason, they looked sluggish. They didn't look like they were on the same page as well. Gronk didn't look like Gronk. It didn't look like Gronk had that gear that we know him to have. It looked like he was running in place for most of the game. And took a year off. I realized that's going to take him. What do we talk about?
Yeah.
You can run on the beach all you want. You can pull sleds all you want, but until you put that helmet on and you're going against somebody else, there's a difference between being in that shape and game shape.
And see, you said a lot of that because I did no running on beaches or pulling of sleds, so you would know.
You do levee running, I know.
Right. The special teams, monster plays for New Orleans. There were 3. Marcus Hunt's block of the field goal that set New Orleans up for points late in the first half. The fumbled on the kickoff that New Orleans was able to recover and get points out of that. And late in the game, and I thought this was big because Tampa was trying to rally, a punt that went down to Jaden Mickens down at the 10-yard line, and Justin Hardy comes in there and he just stops him dead in his tracks. And Jacob, I didn't have the whole wide cut. I'm watching the game on TV like everybody else. But it sure like if Hardy missed him, he had some room, man. I don't know how much further he would have got, but you back him up in field position like that. So I thought the special teams plays were huge where New Orleans was concerned yesterday.
I completely agree with you. And the sky kick after the face mask penalty is something that a lot of teams do. And I know a lot of fans will watch that and say, wait a minute, why don't you just kick it out of the back of the end zone? Because you have an opportunity to do something different. And it's a very thin line. You have to have a kicker that you trust, which obviously the Saints do. You try to put it in a certain spot, not to kick it out of bounds, and you have an opportunity to field that ball. Now, it was a bad play by Tampa Bay for the returner. Should have called him off and got it, but that's why you do that. And the Saints have such a veteran team. Things like that are going to show up, Handy. He had the blocked field goal. He did that against the first-round pick as well, so he earned that one. So many things showed up in that game to a team that has a great chemistry together.
On the offensive side of the football, it wasn't quite as good, although you would look at it and say, well, 34 points against that team. That's not all that bad, and I suppose you'd be right on that particular point as far as the points go. But it never really looked smooth, and Sean Payton kind of took responsibility for that, said it was his worst day as a play caller.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, there's games where you feel like you get into a rhythm, and, I thought we ran the ball pretty well. I didn't really help us out any with some of the looks and some of the calls I made. Look, there's a handful of plays that we're going to watch on tape, and it's not going to be the players. It's on me. So I've got to be a lot better.
I've said this many times. The only play caller I've ever seen, offensive play caller that I've ever seen better in the NFL is Bill Walsh. I love the way Sean Payton calls games ordinarily. This wasn't his best. And the surprising thing was that they were not able to get into a rhythm. Ordinarily, when Payton struggles as a play caller, it is because they threw the football too much. And
right.
We've seen this happen over the years where you'll get in and you look at the play chart and they threw it 45 times and ran it 25, and it's like, wait a minute, you got out of balance. That wasn't the case here. They had a very good balance yesterday. Tampa's run defense, I thought, maybe got in his head a little bit early because they had been so good and he was calling a little bit tentatively. But as the game went on, I felt differently. I didn't feel like it was because they got out of balance. I felt it was because there was a reluctance to throw the football down the field. And They only end up, out of Brees' 30 throws, only 6 of them went more than 11 yards down the field. I think Brees' lack of arm strength in the last few years has been a little bit overblown, but I didn't feel that way yesterday. And he missed on some throws that he ordinarily makes with his eyes closed. There was one out in the flat to Alvin Kamara that would have gone for a first down that I sat there. I can't believe he missed that throw. He just never misses that throw.
It felt like he was putting every ounce of strength into every throw, and it was noticeable on the broadcast yesterday. And going back to running the football, that Tampa Bay defense was always going to be a tough matchup for the Saints. And Devin White, I thought, played an outstanding game for the Buccaneers and a lot of guys on that Buccaneers defense. And that's something that you need to go back and look at, because the Saints, if you're not running the ball well, a lot of the things on their offense are set up by that. But I think he's being tough on himself. Play calling, it's just execution. I don't think it was a play call. That's just the coach taking one for the team, because there was some run plays when you had it blocked well and the backs just simply missed it.
Brees on his afternoon.
Well, if you ask me how I felt like I played, I'd probably say I played awful as well. So I guess that's we get to be our harshest critics, coming off this game. I know that there's certainly we are used to playing at a much higher level offensively, and I think especially in the passing game. So we'll get that back on track.
Yeah, I don't want to freak out about this. They didn't have any preseason games. This is an abnormal season to begin with. But when they wanted to throw the ball down the field late in the game to put it away, they went with a double pass. They went to Taysom Hill. I'm sorry, but that was a ball that was thrown down the field. So we'll see as they try to get into a little bit better offensive rhythm. Still, with all of that, they did score 34 points. Alvin Kamara in the pass game, a bigger influence than in the run game. Tampa is a hard team to run on. They were the number one rush defense in the league last year. And I thought going in, that might have gotten to Peyton's head just a little bit. He'll be better as a play caller. I'm not overly concerned about that. There's way too much track record there with him. But at least in the beginning, I think they're going to have to compensate in other ways for the fact that Drew Brees, they don't look terribly comfortable throwing the football down the field. At least they didn't yesterday.
Right.
Maybe next week is completely different, but they certainly didn't want to do that yesterday.
It's been something we've talked about for the last couple of seasons, like you mentioned. And when you look at how the game plan was set up yesterday, things that we're typically used to seeing from the New Orleans Saints is Michael Thomas, regardless of what defense he's playing, getting more than the targets that he got yesterday, and it felt like they couldn't get on the same page, which they were always on the same page the last couple of seasons. We were asking, okay, who's going to be the number 2 receiver? Who's going to step up? Well, it ended up being a tight end being the guy. Jared Cook had a big day, because when you look at Emmanuel Sanders, he did have the touchdown catch, but only 3 catches for 15 yards. And we kind of talked about Traquan Smith all offseason, Hanny, 1 catch, 4 yards. Again, we kind of made the joke. Taysom Hill had more yesterday. Again, he had more receiving yards than Traquan Smith. So still looking for somebody else to step up. If Michael Thomas doesn't have his A game, it has to be another receiver. Jared Cook had a nice job, but you want to see another receiver step up.
Okay, so you ran the football for 2.4 yards per carry. Your quarterback threw the ball past the sticks 6 times the entire day, and you beat a division opponent by double digits. The Saints can knock you out with more than one punch. They can knock you out with either hand. This defense is good enough to cause turnovers, to make plays, to stymie people, and the special teams is a weapon. You've got a great kicker. You've got a great punter.
Got a great returner.
And you got a Pro Bowl returner. And yesterday you had terrific coverage units, and I suspect that will continue. So we'll let them get into a little bit of a groove there offensively.
I mean, we're sitting here and we are just picking out some of the things that we'd like to see them improve on. They still won the game by double digits. They still were in control of the game. And the defense, I don't think we can any longer just say, the defense is a good defense. No, this is a defense that is starting to show up, and it's coming together. And as you look at it, they've got pieces everywhere. There's not these weak spots where you can just say, man, I really like the starter there. They've got starters all over the place. The depth, that's a question. But I thought yesterday they did a really good job on an offense that has a lot of weapons. I think when you look at Tampa Bay, and we've talked about them, so many weapons, the Saints manned up, they matched up, and I thought they looked as good as they've looked in a long time. And that's without one of your best rushers as well. So, yeah, there's some things to point out. Yeah, it was a little bit of an ugly win, but it was a double-digit win against Tom Brady. And I don't care what team you say after Tom Brady. It was Tom Brady, and,
don't take
preseason, all those type of things.
Don't take wins, period, in the NFL for granted. Certainly don't take week one wins for granted. We went and documented a number of times the problems that the Saints have had on opening day. What about the other teams? Detroit blew a 23-7 lead in the
DeAndre
last.
Swift.
They dropped the ball. The Packers. Did we expect the Packers to win in Minneapolis?
No.
Did we expect the Cardinals to win in San Francisco?
Playboy did, but does
he doesn't count when Phoenix teams are involved. Did we expect the Raiders to win in Carolina? Maybe that's a little bit less of an upset, but Bears winning in Detroit, Cardinals winning in San Francisco was
the Jaguars beating the Colts.
The Washingtons beating
down
the Eagles.
17-0.
Sacked Carson Wentz 8 times. Look, that was. You think the Saints were ugly yesterday? Man, look, Saints were beautiful compared to. Now they weren't Baltimore, but they didn't get to play Cleveland either.
Can we stop talking about Cleveland? By the way,
who started?
Can that be done? Not here on this show. But just, when you turn on the TV, it's, last year all the hype was surrounding Cleveland. And then this year is like, well, now they don't have that hype, but they still got the same guys. So it's going to play out. It's going to be different. And I realize who they played, but that's still just dysfunctional. It does not look like a product that is a well-run organization.
Do they have a good owner?
No.
Okay.
Cleveland does not rock.
One of the things I will applaud about is the fact that they did not get too impatient and get away from the running game, because it would have been easy to. They averaged less than 3 yards a carry yesterday, but they gave him enough of a dose of Latavius Murray, I thought, to keep him honest. And Murray was by far the more efficient back than Kamara yesterday. Some of those, I got this a lot on Twitter yesterday. Did you think that some of the runs were telegraphed that they ran, especially in the first half?
There was 3 different plays, and I'm sure anybody that knows football was watching yesterday, that they made a check at the line, and I turned to my oldest son and said, this is where the ball's going. So some of those were a little telegraphed, and some of that's because you haven't worked on those things in a game situation when typically you would have. And it wasn't just the Saints. There was one time Tom Brady turns around, he says, Blue Sally. I said, stretch left. And we typically, by this time, you already have more in-depth code words, and you have more chemistry, and you don't turn around and say Blue Sally. I mean, almost anybody can figure that out. Well, the L in blue is left, and then Sally's stretch play, right? And so I think it showed across the NFL. Outside of a couple of teams, and the Green Bay Packers being one of those, there was a lot of sloppy offensive plays from veteran players, star players, all pro players that we typically don't see.
And still, there were plays that were made that you have to have extremely talented guys to make. For all of Brees' shortcomings with what he talked about yesterday, there was the long play to Jared Cook. Okay, so you did have that
just by a hair.
Well,
he got that one over.
They count that too. I thought the first touchdown pass to Kamara was a tremendous effort on Kamara's part. There were 3 defenders there that had a shot at him, and he catches the ball outside the 12-yard line there. He makes a couple of guys miss. This is why you put that money into the contract. I thought the contract was a little bit much, but that's me. I mean, it's not my money, but I'm just looking at the future salary cap. But he makes that guy miss. Taysom Hill, couple of plays yesterday, including the double pass. Right. They make enough plays where you go, oh yeah, that's why they're really good. They do this on a day where Brees was pretty mediocre.
Yeah. I
and
think
Michael Thomas.
You heard Drew say awful.
Yeah, and Michael Thomas is the top receiver. Let me try it this way: if I had told you on Friday, Brees is going to throw for 160 yards, and Thomas is going to catch 3 balls for 17 yards, and Kamara is going to run it 12 times for 16 yards.
I would say it's going to be a long day at the office.
Yeah, Brees is not lighting it up. Kamara's not running the football at all,
right.
and Thomas isn't involved in the offense.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to win.
They scored 34 points.
They won, right. So I'm not trying to do silver lining so much as to what they can knock you out with multiple hands at this
huge
point.
Because there's been years when you've put up all these yards, all these points, and you found a way to not win the game, especially in home openers. 48-40 against Tampa Bay a couple of years ago. You put up 40 points and you lose by 8 still. And so there's still some encouraging things that you can find. And yes, they fell into some tendencies as far as the run game and kind of telegraphed some of those runs. But I thought they also did a nice job with Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, when he was in there, it wasn't just to give him the football. There's a couple of times he was cutting off the backside defensive end on zone runs and did a really nice job of it. I thought they did really well with him outside of the one quarterback sweep, which was kind of telegraphed when he came in. I believe it was a third down situation. I thought they did a nice job of implementing him into the offense. He had the 38-yard pass. He had a reception. He had 3 carries. And so that part of it looked really good. So now it's just as a play caller, and Sean Payton took all ownership of this, you've got to continue to grow to not make it predictable.
I do want to say I was probably incorrect about one thing that you were on, and that is the crowd noise. I said I wasn't going to mind that they piped some crowd noise onto my TV. You said no, I don't like that. So if you I watched various broadcasts yesterday, some on Red Zone, some on the network broadcast, and some on NFL Sunday Ticket, and the noise was all over the place. Some of them, what I didn't like about it the most was it was inconsistent. Ordinarily, when you see the crowd kind of rise up, you know something's happened. Well, if I hear the crowd rise up and it's something I can't see on my TV, I assume there's a flag somewhere. I assume there's somebody down somewhere. There's a fight somewhere. Okay. It seemed like I got that escalating noise an awful lot when there was really nothing going on other than what I could see. But in the Superdome itself, all of the players kind of described it as somewhat eerie, if you will. And Sean Payton, this was something else. Hey, listen, the Saints should have had one of the biggest home field advantages in the league yesterday, and they didn't.
Look, it was different. Obviously, you can hear. Well, you just can hear so much more relative to the game. Players on both sides of the ball, obviously different than what you're used to, and yet that's just good, the way it's going to be here for a while. So I think once the game got going, you kind of focused on the task at hand.
I even heard Anthony Lynn, the head coach of the Chargers, say yesterday after the game that I had to keep my voice down to make sure that they couldn't hear me on the other sideline, because ordinarily we're used to having to shout with all the crowd noise. Man, I had to keep my voice down. First time that's ever been said in the history of the NFL. I'm going to keep my
and there was also a couple times when the boom mic picked up a choice word or two, which is going to happen.
Okay, of all of the games I watched yesterday, the Saints Bucs led my own little personal tally and look, it doesn't matter to me, but you're watching the game with your kids, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not perfect, but it's football.
I think it was TB12 said one pretty loud, and my son looked over and his eyes were huge, and I was like, he's just playing football. Emotions are running. I was trying to explain it to him, but hey,
you're going to hear all those words.
We heard that in the XFL as well. Remember, the XFL had different microphones and different crowd noise and stuff. We heard some of that. So,
one more on the Saints before we move on. The defense obviously doing their job yesterday. Cam Jordan pretty much worked Tristan Wirfs at times, and I liked Wirfs. I thought he was a really good pick for Tampa when they got him. You remember the night we were doing the draft?
Yeah, he jumps out of a pool standing right.
But that was a rookie in his first NFL game going against a perennial Pro Bowler on the other side, and Jordan got the best of that.
We did our job up front, and our guys clearly did the job behind us. I mean, Marcus Williams ended up with an interception, his first of the year. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a half dozen more by the end of the year the way he's playing. Then you talk about Jack Rapp coming up with another interception for a touchdown. These guys are just ball hawks. So I love the way our defense is playing. At the same time, we still have the same mindset where we can still get better.
Williams made a really nice play on a ball that Brady sailed in the middle of the field. But Jenkins may be as big of an addition in the last 2 years as anybody that the Saints have had. I mean, Demario Davis as well, of course, but Jenkins doesn't present a small upgrade from Eli Apple. He presents a massive upgrade. And Eli Apple, when he got there, presented an upgrade from what they had before, from the Ken Crawley era. So they've got – there haven't been very many times in New Orleans Saints history where they've had two what you feel like really good corners. There have been plenty of years where they didn't even have one. I mean, you look at the history of the New Orleans Saints, cornerback is probably the worst position over the course of the entire franchise. They got two really good ones now.
Yeah, I remember yelling at Alex Moulton when I was a youth. Don't worry. I remember those days as well. But when they get the opportunity to make a play, they're making it. Yeah. So on the interception that you're talking about, well, Mike Evans didn't run the right route. And, Tom Brady did sail that ball. Well, they were in position and the coverage was still good. It was going to be a forced throw anyways. And when they get that opportunity, they're making the most of it. And when you're playing in the NFL and you're a defense and you get that chance against a Tom Brady, you have to make the most of it. And they did yesterday. They continued to make the plays when there was a play to be made. And that hasn't always been the case. And I'll keep going back to it. This defense, to me, and we talked about it leading up to the game, is still very underrated. Cam Jordan's the most underrated defensive player in football. I will have that argument with anybody that wants to have it. Now, when you talk to players that play against him, they know how good he is. But from a national perspective, you hear about everybody else. This is a guy that can get after you as far as he can rush the quarterback, but he's so damn good against the run as well. I think he is so undervalued, and you're starting to see Demario Davis very undervalued. Now, the Saints value him. They just paid him, right? Yeah. But you're seeing a defense that doesn't care who gets the credit. All they do is go out there, and when there's an opportunity to make a play, they are making it. I think this defense is set up for success through 16 games, not just yesterday against Tom Brady and the Bucs.
When you were in the league, you had players on other teams that you spent time with in the offseason, friends on other teams.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
San Diego's a pretty good spot for NFL players to make their offseason home.
I'm thinking Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans don't spend time together in the offseason.
They probably don't hang out. Probably don't go to In-N-Out Burger out, and just kick it around town. They've got a feud, and I'll be honest with you, I kind of like when there's someone in your division, you don't like them, they don't like you, and when you're going to play them, it's going to be chirpy. Now, the penalty, you can't have that, and regardless of how you view that penalty, Mike Evans and Lattimore, they're locked up, they're blocking each other. As soon as Evans turned his back, that was always going to be a penalty. And I realized that he retaliated, but referees.
Once they see that,
once they see that push in the back, everything else that happens after that is just extra to them.
And they missed everything that happened before.
Exactly.